Welcome back to Ron's Radio Corner, and this is obviously not a radio. Um, I think this is the second video I've done on something that wasn't a radio, and the reason I wanted to do a video on Monopoly is because recently I heard where Hasbro, which now owns Monopoly and has for a while, is coming out with a new version this year. This version will replace traditional cash with a mobile app called the Monopoly App Banking. And that app will handle all the transactions such as buying properties and paying rent, making the game digital. And I guess the idea is that it's going to make it more fun, or at least faster, or maybe faster, which hopefully will make it more fun. Um, so I heard that, and I was a little aggravated. I grew up, um, you know, I grew up playing Monopoly. I loved playing Monopoly. Um, as a kid, I got a Monopoly set for Christmas. It was the big deluxe Monopoly set that came with I think extra money and a banker's tray and this little rotary title card holder for all the deeds. Um, and I played the heck out of that and had that for a really long time until I think the box started to fall apart. Um, I ended up buying another Monopoly game set years later, um, which I think was more like the standard size. And as far as I can remember, it really wasn't any different from the game that I had grown up with. Um, Now, I realize that Monopoly has changed over the years. If you go back and look at when the game first came out in the 30s, and and I'm sure someone must have some great website on this or some YouTube video sort of documenting the evolution of Monopoly year over year. Um, but I think there is a point in time where Monopoly, maybe from the 60s, late 50s, and I don't know until when, the mid 90s, late 90s, where Monopoly changed very little. Um, and it's in this sort of window where I grew up playing Monopoly. Um, you know, I had a set. It seemed like everybody had a set. You know, you go to the cousin's house, a friend's house, you play Monopoly. Um, I can't tell you how many times I would, be at a sleepover. We'd be playing Monopoly, lying on the floor, um, playing for hours because it's not a short game, or at least um, it has the ability not to be a short game. Um, I played it as a small child. I played it, you know, into my teen years and into early adulthood. Somewhere along the way, though, I stopped playing Monopoly, and I don't know why. Um, I kind of wonder if Monopoly, I think maybe we've all gotten to a point where our attention span just isn't there anymore. Which, considering, you know, the YouTube videos I'm making, and my sort of dialogue, my speech, my conversational, uh, I don't know, format, I could be in trouble because I do think you look at TikTok videos and everything is like 60 seconds, 60 seconds, 60 seconds. Um, I wonder, today people talk about baseball games and they say, we got to find a way to speed up baseball because the game takes too long. Did people think that back in the 50s or the 40s or um, I remember playing Monopoly in the 70s and the 80s, um, and never thinking when someone wanted to play Monopoly, oh, it's too long. But now, if someone says you want to play Monopoly, I'm probably like, oh, it's such a long game. As much as I love playing Monopoly, or loved playing Monopoly. Last time I played Monopoly was probably a year or so ago. And the time before that, I couldn't remember. It's been a while. Um, but when I heard that they wanted to come out with this new version of Monopoly, I realized that the game that I grew up with uh, was becoming a thing of the past. Um, that there could be a point in time where I would not be able to buy a traditional Monopoly set. Um, and so I definitely could have gone out and just bought Monopoly because it's there, in Walmart, in Target, on Amazon. But already there are changes to Monopoly versus those versions that I played with, and and I wanted the version that I grew up with. Um, the some of the properties, the colors have changed. The properties, the community chest and chance cards have changed. Um, the money looks different. The board has some tweaks to it, where just from a design standpoint, it looks a little different. The cards themselves, I mean, the format of the cards, just the way they look is different. Compared to like the classic orange card stock and yellow card stock that this version has. Um, but even some of the things, like you won X amount of money in a beauty contest, those cards, some of those cards have changed. This board has where you can pay income tax and you can do like 10%, or I think that's changed. Um, there are some fundamental changes to the game itself. They've evolved the game, um, modernized the game, and I think some of what they're trying to do now with the app and with some of these other additions that they've come up with, some other ones that are supposed to come out this year. Um, I think they're trying to figure out how to make the game more relevant by bringing it up to date. And for me, that ruins the nostalgia factor of the game that I grew up with. So I went out and I looked on eBay. They do make a brand new. They do make like a 1980s edition. And I'm pretty sure that 80s edition is pretty much the game I grew up with. Um, but I decided, that I was going to buy a vintage version instead. I could have really bought one brand new in the box, and spent quite a bit of money just for the nostalgia kick. But this one seemed in good shape, and I've looked it over. I haven't played it yet. Um, the box is got a little wear and tear, but the game itself seems to be in pretty good shape, and it was reasonably affordable. So I picked this up. This is somewhere from maybe 1968 to the early 70s. Um, like I said, there are people out there who could probably really tell you the whole evolution of Monopoly. Um, what I know is that from doing a little reading, General Mills bought Parker Brothers, so around 1968. So that's when you first see this on the boxes. These usually get referred to as like the 1961 edition, but if it's got General Mills on it, you're definitely talking like 68, um, or into early 70s. Uh, so other than that, I mean, it's just you know, it's of that era, what I remember. Um, so the one thing I'll say, it's not a radio, but I do think there is a little bit of an interesting tie between radio and Monopoly. Um, Maybe it's a stretch, but bear with me. The first is both radio and Monopoly really become huge in the 30s during the Great Depression. Even though they both existed in some way, shape, or form before that, Monopoly has a very colorful history where who invented it has been disputed. Um, Parker Brothers and now Hasbro um, have talked about um, Charles Darrow and inventing the game. I think on his kitchen table and playing it with friends, and they liked it, so he made up versions that he sold in local department stores before getting Parker Brothers to buy the game. Um, Naming all the properties after destination spots that he had been to in better times in Atlantic City. Um, but there's a woman, Lizzie McGee, I think it's pronounced McGee or Maggie. Um, she had invented, uh, if not Monopoly, basically Monopoly in every other way, sense, and shape of the she invented a game that resembles Monopoly in pretty much every way, except um, she had invented it to show the evils of monopolies, and there was two ways to play the game. Um, One which was watch how like Monopoly, right? Somebody could dominate the game and drive everybody else out. The other one was a more fair version. It was supposed to be like a lesson to show that um, the evils of monopolies. Um, Radio, on the other hand, um, I don't know if radio has the same sort of um, backstory, but radio certainly had been around long before the 1930s. But radio in the 1930s, and it's odd, right? The Great Depression. Who's got money for a radio? But apparently, lots of people, because they sold a lot of radios in the 1930s, and radio stations and broadcasts really take off in the 30s. Um, and and radio, it becomes gigantic. I mean, radio is how people keep up with news and how they stay entertained. Um, there's no television. People can go to movies, but radio becomes gigantic. So here you are in the 1930s, and Monopoly is a juggernaut as a game, and radio really becomes a juggernaut for people's entertainment. Um, and and both thrive through the 30s and the 40s into the 50s, and both are still, um, and I would say both still remained, um, really relevant well beyond that period. I mean, I grew up, Monopoly was still a popular game, and they must have sold tons of them. Um, the same thing with radio. Radio has been um, relevant for a really long time. But today, both are probably struggling to remain relevant. Um, Radio has to compete with all the streaming music platforms, and you can listen to music on your smart devices and your phone or your laptop, and who's listening to music on an app, an actual radio today. Monopoly is competing with one, much different styles of board games, or is it even fair to call them board games? Um, I don't know what you'd call them other than a board game, but there's definitely games that people are playing, and they're nothing like the style of Monopoly. But also, when I was a kid playing Monopoly, on the living room rug or at the kitchen table, um, yeah, we had video games, but not like we have video games today. And we didn't have cell phones where we're playing games on our phones. Um, you know, Things have changed where Monopoly is really competing. Um, Board games in general, I mean, are competing. Um, for for I don't know, to be a diversion with all these other diversions that are out there. So um, I think where you see both radio and Monopoly, board games in general, suddenly really sort of get remembered, um, is when you have some sort of you know storm or power outage, and then suddenly people are looking for the radio and um, rummaging through the drawer for some batteries to throw in, or they're wondering how they're going to pass the time, and they're grabbing a board game like Monopoly. So um, so to me, a little interesting that Monopoly and radio both have this major impact, like in the 30s or 40s, very popular, and then today, where you usually see them is get a little bit forgotten until suddenly they're needed again. Um, in my situation for this particular game, it came down to nostalgia. I wanted to buy a Monopoly set while I still could. Um, I wanted it to be the game I remember growing up, not whatever new version someone's trying to come up with to make Monopoly more relevant again. Um, so, are you a fan of Monopoly? If so, I'm curious how you feel about the game evolving. Some of these different versions that have coming out. There's also, I mean, there's Monopoly online. There's Monopoly. There's a few different Monopolies online. There's Monopoly card games. They've really tried to do a lot to take Monopoly and keep it at least as a product in the in Hasbro's lineup to keep that name viable and hopefully sell a lot of games. But how do you feel? Do you like the traditional Monopoly game? Did you grow up with something similar to this? Do you like the newer ones? Do you think the game should evolve and change? Do you think they should leave it alone? Uh, leave a comment. And let me know. Thanks for watching.